Welcome to Healthcare IT Today. I'm John Lynn, together with my colleague and friend Colin Hung. The world of technology and healthcare are ever changing in new and novel ways, and that's why we love this stuff. So join us as we discuss the latest healthcare and health IT news, meshed together in new ways, which help generate ideas and new perspectives. Plus, we'll have a little fun along the way. Today, we're going to be doing a 2024 year in review. And today's episode is sponsored by Pure Storage, the data storage platform that grows with you forever. Learn more about how Pure Storage supports healthcare at purestorage.com/healthcare. And be sure to follow the show on social media at the hashtag HITSM and our personal accounts at TechGuy and at Colin_Hung. Plus, check out our 18 years of health IT content at healthcareittoday.com. 2024 has been one for the books, I think, Colin. I don't know, for us, we've been on the road a lot.
This year has been a lot on the road, but it's been good. I mean, it's been fun. But yeah, I can't believe we're already at the end.
Yeah, I had flight status by June, if that says anything. So I think that's the number one thing I get when I go to conferences. They're like, you and Colin are everywhere. And it's like, well, we're not everywhere, but together we might be. Like,
Yeah.
so, like between the two of us, we're at most health IT conferences.
Yeah, I will say that this year we weren't at as many conferences together as we
Mhm.
were in prior years. I mean, other than the big ones, but that was it. We were pretty much each going our own. And there were weeks where we were both at two different conferences.
Yeah, or weeks where we were both at two or three different
Yeah, that's
conferences.
true. Two or three. Yeah, it was fun. I mean, I'll never forget that string I did of four conferences in a single week in Nashville. That's that
Nashville
that
was the
was
hub this year. That is for sure. There were a ton of conferences, and I mean, I still actually have three more to go to in Nashville, which is insane. It's the same week. They're all happening the same week, but that's crazy. Well, what stories this year stood out for you in the world of health IT? What was the big ones for you?
oh, there's so many, John, but the big obvious one for me happened early in the year, right? The Change Healthcare. That was the big event,
That
and
changed healthcare.
yeah, exactly. Well, actually, I gotta admit that remains to be seen, but
Yeah.
but certainly I was the talk of the town. It sort of highlighted a whole bunch of things, right? Whether that was cybersecurity related or the fact that we're all reliant on only a handful of vendors, how vulnerable healthcare really is, and then frankly how much money flows through those exchanges every day, right? Because those numbers started to come out. So, right or wrongly, we had a spotlight put on that area of healthcare. So, to me, that's the number one story of 2024 that stood out. How about you?
How long until they rebrand? That would be interesting to watch. No, yeah, I think you're right, and I think that one captured the imagination because it was RCM and security, and United Healthcare was attached to it, so there was like all of those elements. Like, is United Healthcare too big, and all those discussions. I mean, there was even the CrowdStrike downtime with their update that was screwed up a lot of systems. Not as big because it didn't do as many areas. It didn't hit the RCM the same way, but for those that were impacted by it, certainly was just as big. The big interesting one for me was actually Particle Health and Epic and kind of their dispute, which raised a lot of questions around how should we be sharing data. And then Particle introduced the question that I think we're going to hear a lot of over the next few years, which is Epic in a monopoly? Their antitrust issues. I don't think Particle was the right person to bring it at Epic, and I don't think they brought it the right way. So I think it's just the start of the story. I don't think they'll be successful, but it will be interesting, that whole Epic monopoly antitrust stuff, how it plays out. And Particle was just the first one brave enough to kind of raise the question. I don't think they have enough data there to really do much. I don't think it's going to make much of an impact, but we're going to see that a bunch more. So that one to me was a huge story because I think all of us look at Epic and say, yeah, Epic owns basically most of the large health systems in the US, as far as customers. And you look at that and you're like, that sounds like a monopoly. It feels like a monopoly, but it's one thing to be successful as a company, and it's another to exhibit monopolistic tendencies. And there's,
Right.
there's lots of legal questions there that we're going to be talking about over the next few years.
Yeah, no, agreed. I mean, I say it's weird in that Epic, and no one threatened anybody to adopt Epic, right?
Yeah.
And now they may have some practices that you could argue maybe make it hard for someone to leave, but I would say that's not any different than if you're on SAP or if you're on any other tool. Like it's just hard to get off these megalithic systems, right? But you're right. It'll be interesting to see how that lawsuit and what it starts, right? Or whether it starts anything to look at Epic in the broader sense, because, I think, yeah, I mean, I don't think they were a monopoly in the way they were created, but certainly you could argue that they own the majority of the market, and do they exert too much control? And I think that's where some people may be looking for some chinks in the armor, right?
Well,
Um,
and we're seeing it play out for Google with their ad spend with Chrome, and do they have to split it off, right? Like,
right,
so this is a larger trend, and Epic is just the healthcare version of that larger trend.
right,
And it's weird. In the US, we sometimes are okay with monopolies, sometimes not. It's not always clear, and it's like who's going to come and fight the monopoly and who's willing to do that, right? We see that play out in a lot of different spaces. So anyway, that was a huge story. And kind of related to that, and if I'm Epic, I'm actually cheering Cerner, I mean Oracle Health, whatever you want to call it these days. Oracle Health, they should be cheering them on to help with to avoid the monopolistic approach, right? And that was the other big news, I think, this year. And kind of surprised me a bit that they decided to basically create a new EHR, Oracle Health did, and to code it from the bottom up, and say, hey, we're going to just, we're going to get rid of the old stuff, and we're just going to code it all on a new tech stack. Of course, Oracle Cloud with all their AI features, voice first kind of approach. It was an ambitious effort by them to be able to go after it that way, rather than to just coddle along the Cerner users and then layer AI on top. They said, no, we'll keep the data structure the same, and then let's code a new interface on top of that data. We'll see how that plays out. It's still early. That next year, that will be the biggest news, is was that a success or not? We'll see how that plays out.
I mean, I was there at the Oracle Health Summit, and I got a preview of that, of the new ground up next generation EHR. Wrote about it and we have a screenshot of it, right, in the article we created. And I gotta say, it looks impressive. And if that Oracle bar performs the way they claim it does, with the AI voice and all the different things you can do in it, basically just type a question into it and have it answer it. Then I think, it does represent a monumental shift in the way EHRs are constructed, right? And the way that people would interact with them. So I think regardless of whether it itself is a success, I think that thinking will become a success, because I think a lot of other people will be adopting something similar or have some things already in the works like that. So, but yeah, I had to say, I was pretty impressed with it. And if they do pull it off, it'll be one of the biggest code rewrites from scratch, like stories in history. Like, to
Yeah.
rewrite that whole thing from scratch, which is something that most people do not recommend you ever do. If they pull it off, it'll be one of the ones that say we buck the trend. And they did a pretty good job at incorporating a lot of Oracle's native features that are available in Oracle Cloud. So, I gotta say, I was pretty impressed when I saw it.
Well, and it's interesting. It kind of reminds me of what Dell would often say. They're like, "Hey, even if you don't buy from us, we're going to lower the price of who you do buy." And it's like, I think that's kind of what you're saying. It's like, well, even if Oracle Health's not successful, they may push forward a new paradigm. Voice first. The Oracle bar that you talked about. The other thing that's interesting for me is it kind of reminds me of when Gmail was introduced. I don't know if you remember that. But when Gmail was introduced, they introduced a couple things. One was you don't need folders, right? Like folders
Right.
were ubiquitous, and they said don't, just store everything and then search, right? And that's kind of what I feel like the bar is. Like you don't need to navigate 12 menus, just use voice and get to the data that you need. Is that a paradigm shift similar to the way Gmail said just search, stop, filtering everything to folders? I don't know. We'll see. It kind of feels the same to me, but there are some nuances there, that are a little bit different.
Yeah, just and on that note, other news that stood out for me related to Oracle. Of course, Oracle also announced that their intention to become a QHIN, but there were other companies that did the same. Epic, SureScripts. That was kind of interesting news for me because I didn't expect these three organizations to step up to be a QHIN, but they did, and so that was to me a newsworthy thing for 2024. The other one for me that other two stories that stood out for me, one was the Texas court vacating the HHS bulletin around tracking pixels. So, now there's really confusion. I won't say it solved anything, but there's now a lot of confusion as to should I be using these tracking pixels on my website? Should I not? Can I continue to do personalization? So that was a big event because a lot of organizations were waiting for that, some sort of decision on that. So that finally came through. We wrote about that on Sway Health. And by the way, the actual ruling itself is hilarious. There's a lot of hidden humor in there, and I pulled out a few of those in my article. So go check that out on Sway. And the other big news, of course, in that sort of marketing world, health being bought. So HLTH, the conference being bought and being sold over to another company, that was a big news as well for me this year.
Yeah. I mean, health being sold to Hive is super interesting. And to be fair, seeing how Informa's acquisition of HIMSS has evolved has been big news this year as well. I think it will even be more interesting next year and then the year after, where it's like, okay, this is all on Informa, what's HIMSS role in it, and where, because it takes time for them to kind of take over a conference. So we'll definitely see that. How about technologies? Were there any technologies that got on your radar in 2024?
I'll mention two very quickly, but they're funny. One, I don't know why, but robot companions stood out for me this year.
Oh,
So at Vive, there was
are
this
you feeling
immortal
lonely,
pup.
Colin?
Yeah, maybe they're just cute. I don't know. But at Vive, there was the immortal puppy that I saw. It's an AI powered actual puppy robot that is purely for companionship, but also for remote patient monitoring. I thought that was kind of cool. There's been some actual robots which don't do anything other than they just sit there and talk to you, right? And they have some have robotic faces, some have humanistic faces. I thought that was just very interesting. There's a lot of this kind of technology coming around for mental health, for loneliness, which of course is a big, determinant of health. So that to me stood out. And the other one is using AI to code. So right down in the weeds of using AI for coding. I saw a lot of technologies around that and actually looks pretty promising. So to me, those two technologies stood out in 2024. How about you?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the AI companion. I've been doing LEQ with my father-in-law. It's by Intuition Robotics. He describes it as the best girlfriend he ever had. And it really did work as a great companion, and it's a great thing for him. It definitely elevated his spirits, gave him companionship in a way that was super interesting. And it's fun for me to be able to connect with him since, he's a new father-in-law about a year ago. So it's been neat to do that. When I look at it, of course, AI dominated everything. So, we could mention 1,000. We could do an entire episode of what AI came out in 2024. But the one that captured the spirit of it more than anything else is definitely the AI medical scribes, ambient clinical voice that we've talked about before. But I think what's interesting for me is this year in 2024, the AI medical scribe went from being an ambient voice solution to now being more of an AI assistant, an AI EHR assistant that helps you do not just the ambient needs, but now it's going to start doing coding. Like you said, doing the AI medical coding, sure, there's companies like Codometrics just focused on that, but the medical scribe companies are almost all saying, yeah, I see the value in this, and why shouldn't we have all the data? Let's do the medical coding as well. So they're doing that, and they can even interrupt the session to say, hey, you need to do this. And now how that's going to evolve in 2025 is going to be fun to watch, because no one wants to be interrupted, but they do want to be prompted the right way to make sure they document to achieve the highest levels of coding. We're also going to see that interruption happen when it comes to different quality measures that you may need to meet, or even care guidelines, care pathways that you want to do with a patient. And so the AI medical assistant is not just listening, but it's also educating the doctor on what they need to do for coding, for clinical decision support. That was a big announcement that came out from I think it was a bridge and Wolders Kluwer with their up to date and being able to integrate that. I'd like to see how that's going to play out. What does that look like? I'm still interested to see what's the workflow for that. And does Wolders Kluwer, with the up to date, do they work with a lot of others, or is that going to be kind of a unique partnership between a bridge and them? That would be interesting to see play out. So, just the maturity of that. And it went from being, oh yeah, this doctor may like it, to now, thousands and tens of thousands and of doctors using it, millions of encounters happening, and they're doing it every day. So I'd say that was a maturity thing for me. Another one that surprised me outside of the AI stuff was actually cloud. Like cloud kind of had an interesting moment in 2024. And sure, the cloud is powering a lot of the AI, so that's happening for sure. But the fact that so many people are moving Epic to the cloud and so many CIOs are saying, why are we in the data center business? We shouldn't be, and the fact that Epic said, yeah, you shouldn't be in the data center business. We work great in the cloud and that's possible. It felt like that matured in 2024 where, and maybe it was the fact that all the equipment they'd bought for their data centers was end of life. And so they said, okay, now are we going to, buy new equipment, or are we going to go to the cloud? Maybe that's where the maturity happened in 2024. And so they're like, okay, yeah, let's move Epic to the cloud, and other applications as well. But it seemed like cloud and Epic and EHR in the cloud kind of gained a lot of momentum in 2024 that it hadn't had previously.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Healthcare IT Today with John Lynn and Colin Hung. Today, we are doing a 2024 Healthcare IT Year in Review.
Before we continue, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Pure Storage. We all need a data platform that is reliable, efficient, and manageable. Data is growing and requirements are changing. What feels sufficient and efficient today may not be tomorrow. Just like our own personal health, it's important to routinely monitor your IT infrastructure. And that's why Pure Storage has created a quick quiz to help you start a conversation about whether your data platform is future ready. Or maybe it's just time for a checkup. Go to healthcareittoday.com/pure storage, all one word, to take a quick self-guided quiz and start a path to more reliable and flexible data services. It's awesome what Pure Storage is doing, and you and I have both worked with them a lot. And I love, it's interesting with some of the announcements, Change Healthcare that we talked about, CrowdStrike, all this downtime that has been a theme throughout the year. Pure Storage is one of those hidden gems that, if you're in IT infrastructure, you know all about them because they're going to save you and have your backups in the right place. But, a lot of people, have they really taken account for that? If you haven't, you should.
Well, kind of on that note, other than Pure Storage, John, are there any other companies or people or even places that made your notable list of 2024?
Yeah, I think the big one for me, and I think it's because it's a trend for CIOs, and it's a trend of the consolidation that's happened in the healthcare industry. But that's all the legacy archive vendors, Harmony Healthcare IT, Metaquant, LK. There's a whole bunch of them that are working in that space, and I think they've had success because of all the acquisitions that have happened. And the CIOs are like, why do we have 1,000 applications? We need to rationalize it down to something that's more manageable for our organization. And they do it from a cost perspective. They do it from a security perspective. I don't want to secure 1,000 applications. I want to secure 300, 400, right? Like that's enough. But then they ask the question, okay, well, for compliance, I need to store it for so many years. For security, I need to put it somewhere safe. I don't, not just under someone's desk, that could be breached easily. So I think those companies have kind of had a real success in 2024 and been able, really notable because, and maybe that's part of it too, is they hit the compliance stuff, they hit the revenue stuff, they actually hit the even patient focused stuff because you need access to that data from those legacy systems as well. So I think they kind of hit that trinity of value that makes a lot of sense. The other one to me that's been interesting is the EHR vendors. Like, we take them for granted because, there was so much investment in implementing and go lives for the EHRs. But you go to any of the user conferences, I think you went to a half dozen, I did too, ECW, the energy there was incredible. Epic, amazing. I mean, the biggest thing you've ever seen, took over all of Wisconsin, it felt like, right? You know, like even Next Tech. Like most people are like, what's Next Tech? Right? Like, but you go to their user conference and they have a really great niche with, you know, plastics and dermatology and the elective surgeries, med spas they announced. Like the energy there and the excitement, maybe layered on with all the AI features that the EHR vendors are rolling out, there's a different feeling. Like the EHR isn't just a requirement, but it's actually doing something good for me and my patients.
Yeah, I know. I got to agree with you there. All the EHR user conferences that I went to were very exciting, and all of them had pretty interesting news, and they were doing some interesting things with different partnerships with AI and different new modules and things like that. The NextGen, Greenway, eClinicalWorks, Oracle, all of them actually were a lot of fun. And you're right, there was a lot of energy and good energy,
Mhm.
right? Which was a little different than prior years. So I'm excited for them. And universally, the feedback was ambient scribes, AI scribes work, and they actually do live up to the hype that everyone's saying, which was really surprising. And even my friends at Ontario MD did a study and proved that, right? That it does indeed live up to the hype that, of saving time and giving people back their time and all those kinds of things. So yeah, I definitely agree that EHR was kind of an interesting category of companies making news. There was another uh I don't know what we call it, a duopoly, but there were two companies that I thought were sort of the polar opposites of each other. That was Kroger and Walmart that stood out for me
Ooh,
this year. One
interesting.
because, well, of course, one exited the healthcare space, and one is sticking it out in the healthcare space. So Kroger is staying there. Kroger Health is still an ongoing concern. They were at Health, which was kind of strange to see them, but you know, instead of focusing on opening clinics, they're really doubling down on how they can make their pharmacy that much more effective and valuable for patients, which I think is a very smart way to do retail health, right? So they're not going to be the place where you go to get care, but it is a place where you're going to get your prescription and you're going to get a few other things along the way and more healthy foods and everything. So that's Kroger's approach. And then of course, Walmart's exit and all the reasons why they exited and all the theories of why they exited and so forth. So I think both of those two companies stood out for very different reasons, both valid, I think. I think it was actually smart of Walmart to kind of throw the towel in. If they weren't making any money, then why they're not a charity. So, and I think that opens up the doors and possibilities for other people to get into that space. So I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I'd
Um,
say retail health was notable in 2024 in a negative way. It had a bad year. Forward Health closing down being another example of, a little over their skis. You know who else had a lot of success was the RCM companies. Talking to Avelity, Infinix, their approach to, really it's kind of the counter to change healthcare and realizing, hey, we are essential to the functioning healthcare system and we need to make sure we do security the right way. We need to do customer service the right way. I heard that from companies like Avelity that's really focused on security and making sure that they're reliable and available to their end user. I thought that was a beautiful effort that they're doing in Infinix on the customer side and really focused on making sure that they provide a quality product. You often didn't hear that. It was just number pushers. So I thought that was a nice change of pace for me. um let's
yeah,
shift
that
gears
for,
to conferences too, and talk about some of the memorable conferences we had this year. For me, when I look at it, you know I go to the two categories of conferences: the big conferences, maybe three big conferences, EHR conference, user conferences, and then super niche conferences. That's what I kind of saw play out. So the big boys, HIMSS, Health, Chime, they're doing incredible, right? And they're having awesome communities. You connect with a lot of people. We talked about the HR user conferences being successful. And then I would say like niche conferences, like even like the Direct Trust, talking about interoperability, the interoperability conferences were really successful as well.
yeah, it's hard to argue with that. I mean, the big conferences were a lot of fun. Those ones stood out. I think Vive stood out for me.
Mm.
Probably not for a good reason, but I haven't been in LA in a while, so that was good. But the LA Convention Center is one of the worst convention centers out there, so that wasn't so good. The venue itself wasn't the greatest. Uh, but and then Hymns and Vibe. Hymns for a good reason in the sense that I think it did feel much more full this year, much more energy. It was well done in Orlando this year. So, I mean, I really enjoyed HIMSS. And so I think those were the big ones. For me, the user conferences though stood out in terms of which ones were memorable in my mind, and it was just great to be able to connect with actual users of these systems, get a chance to talk to them. I did a lot of interviews with end users, so that really stood out for me. And again, like at those conferences, it was just really interesting to be spending 2 or 3 days there to kind of really get to know the company and where they're going. And because with a single meeting they can pretty much give you the corporate line, right? But when you bump into them time after time in different contexts and they're actually saying different things and give you the context, you can really get a sense of really where are they going with their strategies. And I really appreciated that kind of access as well. So I really enjoyed like the NextGen, the Greenway, the eClinicalWorks, even the Oracle one that was only there for a short time, Charm Health. All of these were really, really good conferences.
Yeah. That actually hits, I think, another trend we saw in 2024, which is a bit of conference burnout for some people. I'd see some people at conferences and there's even a lot of mini conferences and dinners and everything that people are putting out there. And I have a lot of the CIOs coming up to me and they're like, John, I can only do so many. Like, have we reached a saturation point? And I think that's true for a lot of people. There's a budget issue. There's an appearance issue. If you're a CIO leader and they're like, you're always on the road, you're never here. Who's doing the actual work? That causes trouble. And then budget wise, what can they go to? The user conferences are easier to justify. I think we saw that play out this year. So a lot of provider organizations couldn't go to maybe the larger conferences, but they could go to the user conference because it's so integral to what they do. So I think we saw a little conference burnout this year where they're like, okay, I think there's enough. Like we need to pick and choose maybe a little bit more.
I think so. To that point, I think, there was one conference in particular that stood out for me that was like that. It was the E3 conference from Kairos. They did it in Kiowa River in Charleston. So first of all, never been there, so that was awesome. But it was very, very small and intimate, right? And it was it was combination think tank and more discussion. And I think that may be a trend for the future, right? It's smaller events, much more valuable and meaningful. There, it's a little harder to get burnt out because there's no exhibit hall. There's no, 20 different sessions to choose from, right? And 15 different things to do at night. It's just one event for 2.5 days and you're done. And I thought it was really well done. They executed it very well. So I wonder if that's going to be something of a trend next year.
Yeah, I mean, here's a little anecdote. I was driving with three CIOs we were about to go to a late night pizza, at Cosmo, and dropped him off. And then one of the CIOs actually ran back because I was headed home, and he got back in. He's like, "What am I doing? It's 12:30 at night. I have a flight early tomorrow, and I'm going to see these guys next week at another conference." And I was like, "Yeah, you've definitely hit burnout. That's too much."
Well, John, I look forward to 2025, which should be another very interesting year.
Definitely.
So, thanks to all of you who tuned into this episode of Healthcare IT Today. And I want to thank today's sponsor, Pure Storage. Try this self-guided wellness quiz today at healthcareittoday.com/pure storage, all one word, and take the first steps towards a more reliable and future-ready data platform. You can find out more details about our show by checking out the programs page on healthcarenowradio.com. And please share your voice and engage with the community at healthcareittoday.com and on social media using the hashtag HITSM. I'm Colin Hung, along with my friend and health IT collaborator, John Lynn. Thanks for listening and have a great week.